Imagine a fuel so clean it leaves only water behind. A fuel powerful enough to run factories, freight trains, and even entire cities without contributing a single gram of CO2 to our atmosphere. Now picture a continent betting nearly €1 billion on making this energy fantasy a reality. Europe's huge gamble on renewable hydrogen is not just about climate politics. It's about money, power, and who will control the energy markets of tomorrow. But is this hydrogen revolution a gold rush or a mirage? Let's dive into the high-stakes story unfolding across Europe right now, a story that may decide the fate of the continent's energy independence, its industrial might, and its race to beat climate change. Is renewable hydrogen really the answer, or will Europe's multi-billion-euro experiment become another expensive lesson in the dangers of wishful thinking? Stay with us. First, let's break down what's actually at stake and why everyone suddenly cares so much about hydrogen. Just a few decades ago, the idea of using hydrogen as a mainstream fuel seemed like science fiction. Sure, it was talked about in labs and occasionally used by the occasional space program, but for everyday energy needs, not a chance. Fossil fuels reigned supreme, supplying the raw muscle behind Europe's industries, its cars, and its economies. Fast forward to today. A wave of natural disasters, spiraling gas prices, and geopolitical crises have forced governments to confront an uncomfortable reality. Europe's addiction to imported fossil fuels, especially from Russia, has left the continent dangerously exposed. When Russian gas flows to Europe slowed to a trickle, entire nations faced blackouts, factory shutdowns, and shockwaves through their economies. For the first time in decades, energy independence wasn't just a green talking point. It was a matter of national security. Enter hydrogen. It's the lightest, most abundant element in the universe. When produced from renewable electricity, using wind or solar to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, it becomes what's known as green hydrogen. Unlike hydrogen derived from natural gas or coal, green hydrogen generates no carbon emissions. For policymakers desperate for a clean, flexible, and domestically produced fuel, it looked like the answer to 100 prayers all at once. Last year, the European Commission unveiled plans to invest nearly $1 billion in renewable hydrogen projects spread across 5 countries. These projects are expected to create almost 2.2 million tons of green hydrogen over the next decade, enough to start weaning Europe's heavy industries off fossil fuels, and crucially, to prevent more than 15 million tons of CO2 emissions. But the real excitement and anxiety comes from what these numbers represent. Europe is hoping to create an entire hydrogen economy from scratch. According to the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative, the continent will need a sprawling network of hydrogen pipelines, stretching more than 31,000 kilometers by 2030. Germany alone has announced plans for a 9,700-kilometer hydrogen network, cleverly repurposing about 60% of its old natural gas pipelines to save on costs. Why such urgency? Because Europe's economic powerhouses, Germany, France, the Netherlands, have realized they might need to import 50% or more of their hydrogen by the end of this decade unless they secure domestic production. That means creating a market, building new infrastructure, and convincing industries to switch, all in record time. And it's not just governments jumping on the hydrogen bandwagon. Energy giants, tech startups, and automakers are pouring resources into developing everything from vast electrolyzer plants to hydrogen-powered trucks. Investors see both risk and opportunity as the world's major economies, Germany, Japan, the US, and China, race to dominate the hydrogen value chain. But here's the twist. As much as hydrogen is being hyped, nobody agrees if it's the silver bullet for Europe's energy woes, or a very expensive distraction. To understand why this is so divisive, we need to unpack the fundamental economics and logistics behind green hydrogen. First, production. Green hydrogen is made through a process called electrolysis, essentially using electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. When that electricity comes from wind, solar, or hydropower, there are no greenhouse gases. Yet, for all its promise, green hydrogen is still much more expensive than its fossil-based cousins. According to Aurora Energy Research, reaching cost parity between green and blue hydrogen, hydrogen made from natural gas plus carbon capture, may only be possible by 2030 in a few European countries, with a target price of around $3 per kilogram. Across most of Europe, production costs are still higher. That's why governments are stepping in with generous subsidies. The European Hydrogen Bank's first auction alone awarded $721 million to just 7 projects, offering guaranteed incentives of up to 0.48 per kilogram of hydrogen. Other countries are following suit. Germany has pledged an additional $350 million to fund projects that missed out on EU money but fit the hydrogen bank's criteria. Austria just launched auctions worth $820 million. The hope is that these billions can kickstart a market, drive innovation, and, eventually, make green hydrogen competitive without public support. But is that hope realistic? Some experts are skeptical. S&P Global warns that unless planning bottlenecks are addressed, think slow permitting, complex regulations, not in my backyard opposition, the rollout of large hydrogen projects could stall. The International Energy Agency, IEA, emphasizes the need to track not just production, but also demand and infrastructure. After all, what's the use of producing green hydrogen if there's nowhere to store, transport, or use it? Hydrogen can be a powerful tool for decarbonization, says Dr. Fatih Birol, executive director of the IEA, but only if it's deployed at scale, and only if policy, technology, and markets pull together. That's easier said than done. Europe's ambitious plans rely on a delicate balance of factors. First, the price of renewable power must keep falling. Electrolysis only makes sense if electricity is cheap and stable. But as many grid operators will tell you, wind and solar are famously unpredictable. Intermittency means that electrolyzers might sit idle for hours, pushing up costs. Second, the infrastructure needs are daunting. Building and retrofitting thousands of kilometers of pipelines, high-pressure storage tanks, refueling stations, and industrial users is a mammoth task. The European hydrogen backbone envisions a web linking producers in Spain, Portugal, and the North Sea with industrial hubs in Germany, Poland, and beyond. But this web doesn't exist yet. Only a fraction has left the drawing board. Third, the market for hydrogen itself is still in its infancy. Today, hydrogen is used mostly in oil refining and fertilizer production. To truly change Europe's energy game, vast new demand must emerge, especially in heavy industry, shipping, and long-haul transport, sectors that can't easily be electrified. And then, there's the competition. Asia's hydrogen ambitions are growing fast. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam have all published national strategies, targeting both decarbonization and the potential to export hydrogen to energy-hungry customers like Japan and South Korea. Germany, sensing the risk of being left behind, is already diversifying its supply chains. Experts estimate that by 2030, up to 70% of Germany's hydrogen will arrive via import, through pipelines, ships, or even as ammonia. This global race is accelerating, and the risks are high. If Europe's hydrogen experiment fizzles, the continent could lose both its climate credibility and its competitive edge in green tech. If it succeeds, Europe could leapfrog into the next era of energy. But as the first billion euros are allocated and construction crews prepare to break ground, hard questions remain. Can Europe's hydrogen projects break free from the cycle of subsidies? Or are they destined to become yet another case of public money propping up an uncompetitive industry? Will technological breakthroughs arrive in time to drive down costs? Or will investors and policymakers lose patience? One industry executive put it bluntly, "If Europe gets this wrong, we're not just wasting money, we're risking our industrial future." Let's not forget the environmental paradox. Hydrogen may be clean at the point of use, but producing, storing, and shipping it at scale presents new dangers. Hydrogen is a notoriously leaky molecule, difficult to contain. Even small leaks can reduce its climate benefits, and in high concentrations, hydrogen can indirectly contribute to warming by reacting in the atmosphere. And the scale of transformation is massive. Retrofitting pipelines, replacing industrial boilers, rolling out hydrogen refueling stations for trucks and trains. These are projects that can take years, if not decades. Public acceptance is another wild card, as new infrastructure often stirs local opposition. So what's the verdict so far? Billions of euros are in play, with more to come. Political leaders are talking up hydrogen as Europe's energy savior. Engineers are racing to make the technology work at scale. But for now, hydrogen's future remains uncertain, trapped between huge promise and huge risk. And here's the kicker. The biggest challenge of all may not be technology, money, or even politics. It's time. Europe must orchestrate a technological revolution, build new infrastructure, and persuade entire industries to change course, all in less than a decade. Is that even possible? As Europe stands at the crossroads, the next moves will reveal whether the continent becomes a global hydrogen leader, or if it stumbles into a costly dead end. But there's a twist in this story that almost no one is talking about. If Europe pulls it off, what new advantages and risks emerge? If it fails, who stands ready to take its place? And what will all this mean for everyday Europeans, for jobs, for businesses, and for the climate? Stay tuned, because the real test of the hydrogen gamble is just beginning. As we rejoin the story, Europe stands at the crossroads of its green hydrogen experiment. Nearly €1 billion have been invested, and the continent's leaders wait with bated breath. Will this long-shot bet become the engine of a carbon-free future, or will it sputter under the weight of its own ambition? Let's examine what comes next, and what's truly at stake in this hydrogen race. Imagine two very different futures. In the first, Europe's gamble pays off. Advancements in electrolyzer technology and plummeting renewable electricity prices finally make green hydrogen affordable. The pan-European hydrogen backbone, over 30,000 kilometers of pipeline, links wind farms in the North Sea, solar arrays in Spain, and heavy industries from Rotterdam to the Ruhr. Hydrogen becomes the backbone of a revitalized European manufacturing sector, decarbonizing steel, cement, and chemicals, industries previously thought impossible to clean up. Heavy trucks and ships run emission-free, and Europe's dependence on imported fossil fuels fades into history. In this scenario, Europe not only meets its climate goals, it claims global leadership in a new industrial revolution. According to Dr. Annika Lowen, energy policy analyst, whoever masters green hydrogen first will not just clean up their own economy, they'll set the standards and export the technology to the world. But there's another possible outcome. In this alternative future, technical and political challenges prove too great. Electrolyzers remain expensive, renewable power is too often in short supply, and the much-touted pipeline network is stuck on the drawing board, mired in bureaucracy and local disputes. Instead, cheaper blue hydrogen, made from natural gas with carbon capture, or even old-fashioned fossil fuels, continue to dominate. In this world, European industries lose their competitive edge. Steel mills and chemical plants struggle to afford green hydrogen, facing higher prices than their Asian or American counterparts. Investments and jobs drift away to countries offering cheaper energy, and Europe's climate ambitions stall. Meanwhile, the billions in subsidies are criticized as wasted money, fueling political backlash. So, who wins and who loses, depending on how Europe's hydrogen gamble plays out? If successful, the biggest winners are Europe's heavy industries. These sectors, steel, cement, chemicals, are highly polluting and notoriously hard to decarbonize. Green hydrogen is their best shot at staying both competitive and climate compliant. Stories like the Hybrid project in Sweden, producing fossil-free steel, could become the new European norm. Clean tech companies, those building electrolyzers, renewables, storage, and digital control systems, stand to profit enormously. According to the International Energy Agency, the global hydrogen market could be worth more than $200 billion by 2030. European governments would see a triple win: energy security, industrial jobs, and climate leadership. Citizens would benefit from cleaner air, more resilient economies, and a stake in the technologies of tomorrow. But let's not forget the losers. If hydrogen infrastructure and production remain expensive, costs could be passed on to consumers via higher energy and product prices. Struggling industries in regions slow to adapt could face job losses. And if Europe's hydrogen push outpaces public support, if voters see little personal benefit, political backlash is likely. Even if the green hydrogen rollout flops, not all is lost. The technology and skills developed may still find uses elsewhere, and lessons learned could accelerate future transitions. But the political price could be steep, fueling skepticism about large-scale public investments in climate tech. For outside nations, Europe's success could tip the global scales. If the continent proves that green hydrogen works at scale, other regions, especially Asia and North America, may race to catch up. European companies could dominate global supply chains, setting standards for everything from hydrogen pipelines to refueling stations. Conversely, failure would embolden critics who argue that decarbonization is too expensive or risky. The risks, therefore, are not just technical or financial. They are geopolitical, social, and existential for Europe's industrial identity. But let's look at the practical realities behind the headlines. Right now, the cost of producing green hydrogen in Europe hovers around 4 to 6 per kilogram, mostly because of expensive electrolyzers and the price of renewable power. Blue hydrogen, produced from natural gas with carbon capture, comes in closer to 2-3 per kilogram. That gap is closing as more wind and solar projects come online and as electrolyzer factories scale up. The European Commission's subsidies, about 0.37 to 0.48 euros per kilogram, help bridge the gap, but industry insiders warn this won't be enough in the long run. We don't just need subsidies, says Louise Bertrand, technology lead at Aurora Energy Research. We need reliable infrastructure and clear, consistent policies that can survive political cycles. Infrastructure remains a major bottleneck. The so-called European hydrogen backbone is ambitious. 31,000 kilometers sounds impressive, but building transnational pipelines is notoriously difficult. Local opposition, land rights disputes, and regulatory red tape mean that just a fraction of the planned network exists so far. In Germany, the plan is to repurpose about 60% of the existing gas pipelines for hydrogen use. It's clever, but technically challenging, as hydrogen can embrittle metals and leak more easily than methane. Then there's the issue of imports. Germany expects to import up to 70% of its hydrogen needs by 2030. This opens up new partnerships, especially with North Africa, the Middle East, and even Australia. Some see this as a repeat of Europe's historic energy dependencies, just with new players. As for the practical lesson, why does any of this matter to you, the viewer? First, this is not just a story about distant industries. If successful, green hydrogen could lower emissions from countless everyday products, from cars and smartphones to the buildings you walk into. It could clean up the air in industrial regions and help stabilize electricity bills by making better use of Europe's abundant renewable energy. But there's also a cautionary tale. Major technology shifts, even those with the best intentions, are never guaranteed to succeed. Subsidies and grand strategies are not magic wands. They require relentless innovation, public support, and, perhaps most importantly, political will that lasts longer than any election cycle. So, what can you take away from Europe's hydrogen experiment? If you're a student or young professional, the hydrogen sector is rapidly emerging as a field with huge future demand. Engineers, project managers, legal experts, and data scientists will all find opportunities as governments and industries adapt to a low-carbon world. For investors and entrepreneurs, this sector is both high risk and high reward. As governments calibrate incentives and infrastructures mature, those with foresight could help shape the next industrial revolution, just as renewable pioneers did with wind and solar a decade ago. For ordinary citizens, it's a chance to participate in the debate. Support for clean technology, acceptance of new infrastructure, and the willingness to adapt are all crucial ingredients for success. And what about policymakers? They must learn from past missteps in energy policy. Clear, long-term targets, stable financing, and international cooperation will be key. Europe's hydrogen roadmap is being watched around the world. It can't afford to get lost in technical detail or political squabbles. So, let's return to our original question. Will Europe's hydrogen gamble deliver real change, or will it fail? The most honest answer? It's still too early to declare victory or defeat. Europe has built a solid launchpad, massive investment in research, infrastructure, and policy frameworks. Early projects like Spain's solar-powered hydrogen and Sweden's fossil-free steel show what's possible. Yet for every promising headline, there's a sober analyst cautioning about bottlenecks, costs, and political risk. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Success demands not just technology, but broad collaboration among nations, companies, and citizens. Europe has thrown down the gauntlet. Now the real race begins. Here's a secret fact that rarely makes the headlines. Many of Europe's new hydrogen pipelines are being designed for dual use. They can initially transport natural gas and later switch to hydrogen. This hidden flexibility means that even if the full hydrogen economy takes longer to materialize, the infrastructure investment is far from wasted. It's a clever insurance policy that could pay dividends however the energy transition unfolds. So, what's really at stake is not just Europe's climate targets or industrial competitiveness. It's the continent's ability to adapt, to innovate, and to lead. Whether this hydrogen gamble ends up a masterstroke or a cautionary tale, the story of Europe's green hydrogen journey will shape the energy systems of decades to come. If you found this story insightful, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Join the conversation in the comments below. Do you think Europe is making the right bet?